In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, thanks be to God Almighty, and the peace and prayers on our Prophet Muhammad, his family, and his followers. Greetings. My name is Robert McCaw, MCCAW, and I am the Director of Government Affairs for the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, and I am joined by other members of the Boycott Hilton Coalition, which is made up of more than 40 American and international organizations to hold this important virtual news conference to announce our separate calls on the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Department of Commerce to investigate whether Hilton Worldwide Holdings Incorporated and the Chinese corporations Huan Peng Hotel Management are possibly in violation of U.S. law or otherwise acting counter to the foreign policy interests of the United States by contributing to the Chinese government's ongoing genocide of Uyghur Muslims and other Turkic minorities. During this press conference, I will be joined by Julie Missap, Director of Public Affairs and Advocacy for the Campaign for Uyghur, Mustafa Aksu, Program Manager of Uyghur Human Rights Project, and Mossab Sadia, President of President of Free Uyghur Now. In the past 3 weeks, our coalition has sent separate letters to the Departments of State and Commerce, formally requesting these interrelated federal investigations. On our Facebook Live page, under this video stream, in the chat box, we will now drop the links to both these letters. We will also release the letters via press release following the news conference. For some background, in June, the British media outlet The Telegraph revealed that Hilton Worldwide has entered into an agreement with Huan Peng Hotel Management, one that they could easily terminate, to license the construction of a Hampton hotel on the site of a bulldozed mosque in the Uyghur region of China. In response to Hilton Worldwide not abandoning its plans with Huan Peng Hotel Management to build this Hilton Hampton Inn hotel on the site of the bulldozed dueling mosque, despite public calls and the urging of the bicameral Congressional Executive Commission on China to do so, our coalition is formally requesting the Department of Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo take the following steps. First, we are calling on the Department of Commerce to investigate whether Hilton Worldwide has violated any U.S. laws or regulations by acting counter to the foreign policy interests of the United States through its agreement to establish a Hilton hotel that would contribute to China's ongoing genocide of Uyghurs. If so, we're asking the Department of Commerce to hold Hilton accountable. Second, we're asking for a separate investigation into whether Huan Peng Hotel Management has violated any U.S. laws or regulations by acting counter to the foreign policy interests of the United States through its planned construction of a Hilton hotel on the site of a Uyghur mosque that was destroyed as part of China's ongoing genocide. If so, the Department of Commerce should hold Huan Peng Hotel Management accountable. And third, most importantly, we're asking the Department of Commerce-led End User Review Committee to consider adding Huan Peng Hotel Management to the entity list under the designation of the People's Republic of China for acting contrary to the foreign policy interests of the United States for aiding China in its cultural erasure and genocide of Uyghur Muslims and other Turkic minorities. It's important to note in recent years, the Department of Commerce has added several dozen private Chinese corporations to the entity list for activities connected to China's genocide of Uyghur Muslims and Turkic minorities. Since its initial publication, grounds for inclusion on the entity list have been expanded to activities sanctioned by the Department of State and activities contrary to the U.S. national security and foreign policy interests. We believe by adding Huan Peng Hotel Management to the entity list, the U.S. government will establish the precedent that companies that aid China in the cover-up of its ongoing genocide are not immune to U.S. sanctions. In July, Secretary of State Blinken warned American corporations that they, quote, run a high risk of violating U.S. law, quote, for investments connected to Xinjiang. This warning came after the State Department's March determination that China's ongoing atrocities against Uyghur Muslims and other Turkic minorities is an act of genocide and a crime against humanity. In response to this warning, our coalition has also written Secretary Blinken to formally request a department-wide review of Hilton Worldwide and Huangping Hotel Management's egregious conduct. Specifically, we are calling on the Department of State's U.S. National Contact Point for the OECD guidelines to conduct a specific instance review of Hilton Worldwide's activities in China. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, known as OECD, their guidelines include a grievance mechanism known as the specific instance process, in which a specific instance complaint is raised about the conduct of an American enterprise that is alleged to be inconsistent with the recommendations that are contained in the guideline. The United States is one of 36 member governments of the OECD that have endorsed the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises. More so, Hilton Worldwide's public declaration of human rights principle also recognizes the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises as best practices for managing human rights risk. Therefore, we believe an OECD special instance investigation is very appropriate and needed. We are also calling on the Department of State's U.S. Office for Commercial and Business Affairs to conduct a review of Hilton Worldwide's activities for possibly violating the principles of the United States National Action Plan on Responsible Business Conduct, which includes helping U.S. businesses to be global leaders in promoting respect for human rights and responsible conduct in communities where they operate. It is our hope that the federal government, these agencies, and the Biden administration will respond to these calls for action. We also plan to urge Congress to push for these agency reviews. Now, for some background information on the Boycott Hilton Coalition, on September 16th, we held a news conference outside the Capitol Hilton in Washington, D.C. to announce our worldwide boycott of Hilton. Last Saturday, the Boycott Hilton Coalition held an educational leafleting outside of Hilton hotels in a dozen cities in the United States and Canada. The coalition has also launched a change.org petition drive asking signatories to take a pledge to join the global boycott of all Hilton-owned hotels until the company cancels its plans to establish a hotel on the site of a bulldozed Uyghur mosque in China. The web address for the change.org petition is change.org/boycott Hilton, all one word. Also, in September, the Boycott Hilton Coalition called on the UN Global Compact to begin the process of removing Hilton Worldwide as a participant over that corporation's violations of its principles by entering into agreement to license the construction of a Hampton hotel on the site of a bulldozed mosque. We are currently in process of following up with the UN and giving the Department of State and Department of Commerce time to respond to our request. I will now invite our fellow coalition speakers to address the conference, and following that, we can take any questions from the media via the live stream's chat box on Facebook. We will first hear from Julie Millsap, Director of Public Affairs and Advocacy for Campaign for Uyghur. Julie.
Thank you very much, Robert, for having me here today. I have to be honest, I'm completely dismayed that this press conference remains necessary. Yet again, we're here to decry the egregious behaviors on the part of Hilton in continuing to fail to address this and calling on the U.S. government to take meaningful action to do so. So as we're looking at the egregious behaviors on the part of an American corporation, perhaps we don't need to be surprised by the despicable actions of those most concerned with profit above the values of humanity. But what we're asking for today is for our own government to shoulder its mantle of responsibility to hold companies accountable in the absence of human conscience. We have no immediate power to stop the hands of the Chinese regime as they strive for bloodshed and destruction, but we do have the power to address our own hand in it. So I want to remind everyone for context that we're not talking about mere cultural or religious offense. We are talking about complicity in a larger mechanism of genocide in East Turkestan. And when we say, as we always do, that democracy and freedom, as well as human dignity, are under attack on a global scale by the Chinese regime, this is what we mean. In a land where millions are in concentration camps and used as modern day slaves for major brands, in a land where women are being forcibly sterilized and raped, in a land where close to 1 million children, at least, are being ripped from their families to become wards of an atheist communist state that has declared war on these children's ethnic identity, religion, and very lives, how can we continue to be watching as a hotel is built on the site of a destroyed mosque? In the absence of access to the camps or photos of the victims and brutalities that they've suffered, we have this evidence of the war on Islam, war on the Uyghurs through these scars on the land and its holy sites. And so to not merely refuse to bandage these deep, deep wounds, but rather to pour salt upon them should be viewed as evil, and our government's delayed response would be the epitome of pitiful. Actually, earlier today, I was at the Dachau concentration camp in Germany. And I have to say, standing rooted in the spot where such horrible atrocities occurred, it was doubly sickening to me to know that this vow of never again is ringing hollow right now. Genocide is not carried out because of the sick minds of a few master architects alone. It's legitimized through the willful negligence of the international community and corporations like Hilton. So we must be clear-eyed. There should be no further discussion of cooperation with the Chinese regime. Our government here in the United States cannot have two competing agendas. This is a moment in time when we need to choose to mean what we say, when we state that the United States is placing human rights at the front of its diplomatic agenda. So in this sense, what we're asking for today is really the most basic of things on the part of the USG, and continuing to claim that hands are tied is a really cheap excuse for what Hilton already knows is within its power to do. We're going to continue to call on civic society, on the Muslim Ummah, and all with concern for human rights and the future of the free world to rise up. And as such, we are calling on the State Department and Commerce to do what they can do to stop this twisted situation. Thank you.
Just learning how to take myself off mute there. Thank you so much, Julie. Our next speaker is Mustafa Aksu, Program Manager of Uyghur Human Rights Project. Mustafa?
Salam. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a Uyghur American, and if I were still in my homeland of East Turkestan, I would be in the Chinese concentration camp. I'm free, but many of my family members are not. I'm mourning my relatives, classmates, and friends who have disappeared or died after the brutal and horrifying treatment that they have suffered in ongoing genocide. The genocide of the Uyghur people includes the destruction of our culture and the eradication of our heritage. The destruction of mosques is not happening in a few isolated cases. Since 2017, the Xinjiang government has demolished or closed an estimated 16,000 mosques. Today, we are asking the Commerce Department and the State Department to examine Hilton's partnership with Huangpeng Hotel Management and their plan to profit from the Chinese government's destruction of Uyghur mosques. The US government issued a formal warning to all American businesses in July 2020 and again in July 2021. And this business supply chain advisory says, quote, given the severity and the extent of these abuses taking place amid ongoing genocide and crime against humanity, businesses that do not exceed supply chains, ventures, and/or investments connected to the Uyghur region could run a high risk of violating the US law, unquote. So it's time for State Department and the Commerce Department to review Hilton's plan to ignore this warning. Hilton is choosing profits over people and contributing to China's genocide and culture erasure of Uyghurs. No company should profit from a genocide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker and final speaker is Musab Sadia, President of Free Uyghur Now. Musab?
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Peace and blessings be upon you all. My name is Musab Sadia. I'm the president of Free Uyghur Now, which is a student coalition nationwide and internationally that aims to bring awareness to the Uyghur genocide and also advocacy on the ground in campuses and outside of campuses among students and other young professionals. And alhamdulillah, what we've been able to do with this coalition is amplify the voices of people who otherwise are not able to express themselves because they are being exterminated, quite literally, with intent to exterminate them by the Chinese government. Genocide rests on one thing and one thing only, and it distinguishes it from crimes against humanity by intent. And it's the intent to exterminate in part or in whole, and building a hotel on the site of a demolished mosque by the Chinese government is complicity in that intent. It's very clear. This is a site of ethnic heritage for the people who are affected, for the people who are targeted and victimized by the Chinese government. And Hilton's response to that is to make profit off of it. As people of justice and as people who believe in advocating for what's right, even when it be amongst ourselves or upon ourselves, we have no choice but to stand heavily against this with everything that we've got. We have no choice but to ask the United States government and to advocate and lobby the United States government to make sure that these companies are held accountable, because at the end of the day, we have a responsibility and a duty to never again. When we say never again and when we say no business with genocide, unfortunately, those are calls with no action. Those are empty statements, empty slogans that have no real tangible meaning for them, because unfortunately, the way that forced labor in China and East Turkestan has permeated the textile industry, for example, it's affected and it's tainted almost 20%, 80% of the textile industry. And the idea here is that as people of faith, as people of justice, as students and young professionals who believe in the idea of advocating for what's right, we have to do our part. And the United States government must do its part as well, especially that this is no longer just an ethics question. It's also a question of national interests. How can the United States government declare the Chinese government as an actor in genocide against the Uyghur people while its own companies are doing business with these actors? How can the United States government allow companies to jeopardize its national interests and completely contradict its national policies and global policies? So we are asking the State Department and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to investigate the company, to investigate Hilton for being complicit in genocide and possibly contradicting United States international policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mossab. And I want to thank again our speakers from Campaign for Uyghur, Uyghur Human Rights Project, and Free Uyghur Now for joining CARE as members of the Boycott Hilton Coalition. Our letters seeking an investigation, separate investigations from the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Department of Commerce are posted in the chat box for this virtual press conference, and they will also be included in a press release that we will be issuing shortly. The contact information for all speakers in today's press conference will be included in that press release if media would like to follow up. With this, I would like to conclude today's virtual press conference and thank our viewers for watching. Assalamu alaikum.